I'm Dr. Wendy Makoons Genius. I work as an associate professor in the Department of Languages, and I am talking about Lang 160, which is Ojibwe culture and history. Lang 160 fulfills several liberal education requirements. It fulfills the R1 and K3 requirements. It also fulfills the diversity requirements for the system. And the objectives of the course are to introduce students to Ojibwe culture and history and to various themes relating to the colonization of Indigenous peoples and their cultures and languages throughout the United States and Canada, because the Ojibwe communities, the border goes right through some communities, but also there are communities on either side of the U.S.-Canadian border. So this course is looking at different ways that these communities were historically impacted by colonization and how they continue to be affected. We also look at how things associated with colonization, different mechanisms associated, such as stereotypes, the denial of education on some groups, and also the forced education of other groups, how those affect everybody in our society. It's a really different kind of course in that we have some lectures where we're learning about topics that there isn't a whole lot of published information on, but I draw in my own research and different elders that I've worked with throughout many years. So there's a small lecture component, but there's also a really great hands-on component, and we try to incorporate different cultural things throughout the course. So we make stuff. We make different kinds of hand creams. We do a lip balm. We make finger woven belts when we're learning about the Métis or the Midshift. They're mixed blood people, and we make bath salts, inhalant, and we have a video that we have made of this last spring. We also have a tea component because we're learning about different plants that are really important to the culture, and it's important for Ojibwe cultural protocols that when someone's learning about a plant or a tree, these are other beings, these are other forms of life, and it's really important to use all your senses to learn about these other beings, and not just for proper identification, but so you can remember these beings. So we use teas in the class of many, not all, but some of the plants. And students bring mugs, and we try different teas and different to have the taste of these different plants at that time. And we also use a lot of in-class discussion in small groups and larger groups. So students can learn from each other, because some of these topics are dealing with privilege and institutional racism, and then there's some cultural topics that are totally different worldview that nobody has possibly learned about before in the classes, or maybe some students have and some students haven't, so it's really good to learn from each other. We have a research paper component where students look at one aspect of the culture, one cultural practice, such as harvesting wild rice, harvesting maple sugar, the clan system, looking at musical instruments, looking at making birch bark canoes. There's a whole list of topics that students can choose from, and they work in a group throughout the semester to learn about this topic, and also to learn about how it has been impacted by colonization. So changes that have occurred since in the last 100 years to this practice, also things that haven't changed, and efforts to revitalize these practices as well. So you work on that. We have a librarian come in and help students find sources, and I work with students. We have multiple things throughout the semester to help students with these, but there is this research component to it. I want students to learn about Indigenous peoples, be introduced to them, or learn more about them depending on where they are on the spectrum of having worked with or being an Indigenous person. I also want students to make connections between the situation of Indigenous communities and their own situations and their own lives, and to know that these groups are still around. They're still we're all very much part of the same society, and we all have very common, we have common goals, and we have common experiences, and we also have different goals and different experiences, and we need to work together on those. I really want students to learn about a different worldview, or possibly one that they already knew about and didn't know as much about, because Ojibwe worldview is really, really different than non-native worldviews. From anything from looking at what beings that we consider alive that English does not, to grouping the third person, or the he/she person in Ojibwe. This is actually in Ojibwe language. It's this other group. So there's me, you, and then there's neen, geen, me, you, and there's ween. It's translated as he, she. There isn't a gender on our third person, and that's a really different. Even if there's 1 or 20, these other, that isn't me and you, on this other group, and it's really a different way of seeing the world, of talking about yourself and talking about others. And I think it's really relevant today, especially on our campus. We have so many students and faculty members who are identifying with different pronouns for that third group. And in Ojibwe language, we already have this word, ween, that there is no he or she. Everyone is just ween. So it's a different way of thinking about life and living and humans and ourselves. This course is one option for the Ojibwe language certificate that students can get. They can take this course, and then they take 3 language courses, and they have a certificate, which for most students now counts as their second program.